Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. We definitely appreciate everybody showing up this weekend to the conference, so thank you. My name is Dennis Schneider. I am the technical support manager for EarthRanger. So my responsibilities mostly involve getting sites deployed, set up, running, and then dealing with any issues that are ongoing as they go along. So we're going to talk today about, like I say, protecting your data. So where are your rhinos at right now, right? Where are your camera traps located? Where are you patrolling this month? Where are you not patrolling this month? Obviously, these are critical questions for effectively managing a protected area. But it's also gold for poachers, right? So what can we do to protect that data? So what we're going to do is we're going to split this up. Our friend and colleague Sean Levy here from Kinetic 6 is going to join me. He's going to talk a little bit about the threat that is out there, and then I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about EarthRanger and the steps that we're taking with the EarthRanger product.
Okay, my name is Sean Levy, Kinetic 6. If you do know of Kinetic 6 in conservation, we do radios, radio infrastructures. Outside of conservation, my background is ex-Special Forces communicator, and outside of conservation, we work with governments, special forces, and tend to go into hostile environments, and Ukraine being one of the most recent ones. Outside of conservation also, we do a lot of cyber work with the dark web and open source intelligence for intelligence agencies. So that's my background. The whole IT piece, why is it so important to you, right? So whilst we were building infrastructures throughout the last 9 years, COVID came, and then ultimately we couldn't deploy from the UK into and across Africa. Lucky for us, we had some great Kenyan engineers, and they were deploying, but we couldn't actually deploy, and some of the stuff we were doing and wanted to do, we could not. So utilizing some of the cyber tools that I had at my disposal, one of them being a product called Dark Owl, which was actually found by the guy that invented the dark web, a guy called Andrew Lumen, who actually invented Tor. So I asked permission to use their tool for conservation to my clients to see if there was a cyber threat out there online, okay? So all the people I knew, and I didn't want to do people I didn't know, because ultimately I didn't want to then email you randomly and say, hey, you've been hacked, because then you're going to kick my ass, right? So we put the domain names of everyone that we worked with in conservation into the most powerful dark web search tool on the planet, okay? And we use this for government, special forces, militaries, and big commercial entities like banks, for example, okay? So we can monitor anything that goes on the dark web across the whole of its system, okay? So on inputting all my conservation friends and clients in that system, I actually noticed there was 7 breaches with quite well-known organizations. And the 2 things that I actually noticed was we had your passwords, and they were very weak. So social profiling, when you do a password, I'm born in 1975, I know I don't look it, probably look older, so, and I support Chelsea. So my password isn't Chelsea at 75, right? But we know that people do use weak passwords because we're lazy, okay? We have Facebook, Twitter, and all sorts of other social media pieces. And if you're in charge of the IT system and you've got to put a password together, I guarantee it's going to be pretty much linked to the sort of stuff that you do, okay? So it's your football team, your favourite animal, your favourite country, where you got married, where you got engaged, and ultimately, cyber criminals, right, if they know a little bit about your organisation or you personally, they will follow you on Facebook, realise that you're head of IT, see that you follow Man United, and guess what? They will probably try Man United in 1985 as your password, and guess what? It probably is, okay? So we realised that the passwords that people were using in conservation were very, very weak, and actually I was very surprised how many passwords, how many people had been exposed. So the second thing that was obvious to me is if I'm finding your details on the dark web, that means someone in those organisations have clicked on a link. Someone has sent an email to you or something, and you've looked at that and like, oh wow, yeah, I really enjoy that. I want to go and read a bit more about it, and you've clicked on it, and ultimately your computer is now infected with a virus, okay? So if they know what department you work in, and they now know what password you are, and they've now got into your system, your accounts, they know what the accounts are doing, okay? So if you think about it, if your organisation is using EarthRanger, and then someone finds out who is in charge of EarthRanger, because we all love to put stuff on social media. As a company, I've got to balance my social media profile with, look what I'm doing over here, but at the same time, I'm not going to say, hey, look at me in Ukraine, because that's pretty dangerous. The Russians aren't going to be too happy with that, right? But ultimately, I've got to also post about good things, because I want to promote my company. So as you as organisations, you're always going to be on the World Wide Web, and you're always going to be promoting what you're doing and how important it is to yourself, okay? So it doesn't take long for a cyber criminal to look at what you're doing and realise that you're in charge of the IT, or you might be in charge of the EarthRanger. You're always like an EarthRanger posts, and guess what? They socially profile you, they hack you. And then once they hack you, if they have access to the PC or the computer that you're using your EarthRanger on, and then they can crack the EarthRanger password, then they've got access to everything that you're doing. And this whole weekend, you see that all the different people using EarthRanger are completely different. The fact that some people have got rangers, elephant animals, camera traps, everything and all the APIs are being fed into your EarthRanger, and ultimately now someone has that access, okay? So if they have access to the EarthRanger and they can see that, then ultimately that's very damaging for the organisation, okay? The whole point, and this is what I mentioned, open source intelligence. Open source intelligence is everything you do on the World Wide Web. Everything you do personally, the fact that you're tethering yourself to the organisation you're working, and it's very, very easy to actually socially profile someone, find out what they're all about, and then ultimately crack a password they're using. So open source. So when you are posting stuff on social media, and I know there's, I've noticed in one of your slides you've got it, when you're posting stuff on social media, look in the background of that picture. Every picture I take, before I actually post it, there's a reason why those things are in that picture. Okay, sometimes it looks like it's random, but it's everything I do and everything I post, there's a reason why that picture does what it does. And it says what it says, and even the content. Because I'm always thinking, if someone's going to be looking at this picture, what is in the background that could be damaging to me, my family, my organisation? And ultimately, that's the sort of thing you should be looking at. If you're doing EarthRanger stuff, and you're constantly following EarthRanger, and you've got a massive amount of data coming into your national park or wherever you're working, or your government, ultimately, all that information in that single picture is very, very useful to those cyber criminals, okay? So ultimately, what you want to be able to do, and I'm not here to teach you teach you IT policy, because I'm probably the worst person on a computer, but I do know cyber. So ultimately, your organisations need to look at the policies, how you're running your password policies, who's got access to the data, why they've got access to the passwords. Computers that have the EarthRanger platform on shouldn't be tethered to any other, and there should be email systems on that computer. That computer should solely be purely for EarthRanger. So actually, then you're minimising the risk from that threat. And then ultimately, passwords. I could guarantee you that you can remember a password with your name, your football club or whatever, right? If I was to say to you, I could guarantee you that I can make you remember a 20-word password if we did it once. If I said to you, right, come up with a 20-word password, I guarantee you will never forget it if you did it right now. Possible or not? You shake your head. So how would I come up with a 20-word password and never forget it? No? I can do a 50-word password and never forget it first time. And I'm going to then hand it over to Dennis, who's going to talk IT.
Just repeat the same word.
No? Okay, so let's get Britney Spears, your favourite artist? Yeah? Right, who doesn't love Britney Spears, right? So pick a password. So I say Britney Spears because clearly you don't follow Britney Spears, right? So again, I'm socially profiling you, right? If I say Britney Spears, right, if anyone's socially profiling you, they're not going to think Britney Spears' #1 album on Spotify, right? Pick a song, pick a line, right? The first line of the song is 10 words, right? So that's your password, that song, right? Every first letter is a capital, every 3 is an E. Oh, sorry, every E is a 3, every 4 is an A. So you just pick a random number and letter that actually look like each other. So I always use 3 and E, I always use A and 4, and I always use I and 1. So now, all of a sudden, now you just create a password that no one ever is going to crack. Because also, in my other world, we also work with governments to crack passwords. So I know how people crack passwords because we do it. And I know how systems work when you put an algorithm. So for example, if I see someone follows Man United, I would then put Man United at 85, put that into a system, and anyone with that password will then come up. And I know that's how I socially profile you backwards, right? But if you use a Britney Spears song, right, I'm not just saying that because I don't like it, I'm not sort of like picking on her, but ultimately, I bet you not many people here have got her album on their Spotify, right? So that's why I'm picking on her. So pick a song, pick a phrase. Jack and Jill went up the hill, right? That's your password. So who's gonna think that you chose that as the password? So that's how when we generate passwords, it's guaranteed that no one's gonna crack that, because ultimately that's how you work your IT. So for me, I'm gonna pass over to Dennis. All I want you to know is there is a threat in conservation. People are trying to find your data. Your data has been, or there has been leaks on the dark web, and it is out there, and we are still monitoring it, and at the moment there is none in the conservation people that we work with. They've all been knocked down and they've all changed their passwords, which is great. We obviously did your EarthRanger, and you've had 0 leaks, well done. But ultimately, all I wanted to get across is there is a massive threat out there, right? You do amazing things, you have a ton of data that people want to know. So just be mindful of the data that you're looking after, protect it, okay, and be a little bit smarter with your passwords and how you manage what you're doing, who's managing the passwords, who's managing the data, who's managing the system. And if you do that, at the moment, there is no data leaks within conservation as I'm aware of, which is a good thing. So please, let's try and keep that as it is, and be mindful the data you hold is very important, and EarthRanger data is epically important. So that's my message to you all today, okay?
Thank you, Sean, very much. Scary, right? But we all know it, right? We know it's there. We know it's the threat. We hear about it all the time on TV, on the news, et cetera. But, you know, online systems are a way of life, and we're not going to go away from that. So in my role, I talk to a lot of people about EarthRanger. One of the questions that often comes up is security, is I'm online now, right? And isn't that scary? Isn't that dangerous? Yeah, it can be, obviously. But we can manage that. The key is that we have to work together to do it. So security is really a partnership, right? It's between you, the teams on the ground, and it's between us on the EarthRanger side, right? So we need to provide a product. We need to provide information that helps you make your data secure. So first thing, as Sean was talking about, is user accounts, definitely. So teaching people how to create passwords, teaching people good practice is all hugely important. From our perspective, on the EarthRanger side, we manage, we store all user accounts. We do not store any passwords. If somebody calls me up and says, I forgot my password, can you send it to me? We don't know, we can't even get it. It's all hashed, it's all encrypted, and then it's stored in our database, so we don't know what it is. The only thing we can do is send you a notice that lets you reset your password. So know that we do not have access to any of that information. It's all heavily encrypted. It's all using AES 256, which is standard high-level encryption that you'll find across all the standard IT platforms these days. So everything that we're doing is we're trying to do the very best that we can in the safest way possible. The second thing that you'll find in EarthRanger, and you probably all have exposed to it for those that are using EarthRanger, is permission sets. So the way we break everything down in access to data through the EarthRanger system is through permission sets. They can be very tightly controlled. So for any user in your organization, you can assign them a group or a small set of permission sets that are only relevant for the data they need. If they need access to Rhino data, great. If they don't let them have that, right? If they don't need access to various reports, that's fine. But we can control that. A couple of the other things on the permission sets is when we have external systems that talk to your site, what we try to do is make it a write-only permission. So if for whatever reason, if that would ever get hacked, if anybody would get access to that, they would not be able to pull data back out of the system. So they can write stuff in, but they wouldn't be able to get data back out. So just standard practices that we try to follow when we're configuring a site. Another feature that we have in EarthRanger is called profiles. And this is really born out of an ops room type environment. So imagine you're in the ops room and you know there's different people coming and going, there's different computers set up. how do you manage the passwords and the accounts on those systems where there's multiple people using them? We like to set up profiles where possible. So the way a profile works is there is one master, or a handful of master user accounts, which are typically owned by the ops room manager. So they have their account name, they have a password. So they have the ability to access EarthRanger from the ops room or from elsewhere. The other users in the room use what are called profiles. Profiles attach to an account, but they do not have a password associated with them. So if they walked out of the building and they try to get on another computer and log in, they would not have credentials to be able to do so. So it's good operating practice in the ops room. The other thing that allows you to do, why would you change profiles rather than just leave it up and not let anybody know the password? It's for tracking the data that's being entered. So if I'm sitting down and I'm entering a report, I want the manager later to know it was me that entered the report and not just some generic account that's in the ops room. So when Mike comes in later, he will sign into his profile and everything that happens will be associated with him. So if you're interested in that, definitely let me know. We can help set that up. On the other side, we've got system security. What's going on behind the scenes, right? What do you take for granted that we worry about every day? Network traffic. Everything that we do is encrypted. So obviously, when you go into your web browser and you type HTTPS, that S means it's a secure link. So it's an encrypted link. Any data that we go back and forth between the browser and the servers is all encrypted. If anybody would get access to that, it wouldn't be able to decrypt it or get any meaningful information out of it. We obviously have multiple servers that are operating and running your system for you, right? There's web servers, there's database servers, there's API servers, there's all kinds of machines running in the background. All of that traffic is on an isolated network behind the outside firewall, right? So none of that traffic is exposed to the outside world at all. Everything's happening behind the scenes. So all of this, again, is standard IT practice on the server side. So just trying to make you aware of how much goes into the back end side of that. ER on premises, and what I mean by this is, the question I get sometimes is, if somebody runs into my control room and grabs my computer and heads out, right, in the middle of the night, what do they have with them? The answer is nothing. Everything's online. We're running through a browser. If no data is stored locally, so whatever's on, there's no data that's stored on that computer from the EarthRanger system. So that's a safe place, if you will. Mobile device security with the EarthRanger mobile that you've heard about, with other apps that we use. All of that data is push data. It's coming from the mobile device into EarthRanger. So if I have a device and I'm running ER mobile, I go out and I collect some data about snare locations. I will have that on the device. If I have a connection, it will sync to the servers, send the data from the mobile device to the servers, and then wipe it off the device. Somebody grabs the device, runs off with it. Somebody has it at the bar on the weekend. They can't open it up and see all of the work that they've done over the last week and pass it off to anybody. So again, a kind of a non-starter for anybody trying to steal the equipment to get data that way. Yeah?
What if they're not connected to the network? Is it storing it until they're not connected?
Yes, it will store it locally until it can get a connection, because that's the only way that we can get it back out of the system, or off of that device and into the system. But a good question. Yeah.
You also have a timeout on a session. Say someone was logged in and they were in the middle of inputting data, and maybe they don't log out and the device gets stolen.
Yeah, there are timeouts. So the session timeout now is 48 hours. So just from a user login standpoint. So when you go to your browser and you type in You log in, it will remember who you are. That's remembering a web session. So there is a 48-hour limit on that. But there's no data that's associated with that at that point.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to ask that on premises, how does that work? Because let's say they take your computer within that 48-hour period and they get onto your EarthRanger, like obviously presuming they can get through your password, switching on the laptop or the computer, whatever it is. But how does it track kind of where the person is, or how does that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There could be a small window there where if they could get back into the browser history, perhaps. But if you lock, that would certainly require locking the machine and making sure that there's security on that device as well. That would be one potential area to look at. So.
Because, I mean, well, like for example, I go into EarthRanger on a daily basis, so that 48-hour window is basically it's permanently.
Yeah, let me talk with the development team on that one and see if I can get you a better answer on that one.
Just curiosity on that. If you switch IPs, does you need a new session token?
I believe it does create a new session token on that one. So I don't hold me to that one, but I can try to find that out for you.
I mean, it's all about how you keep track of it. If you're caching that session ID as a cookie on the browser, then that even if you change IP addresses,
yeah,
you're still going to get that same session ID being on it. But it's a very valid question.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Okay. ER to ER sharing, for those that are familiar with that feature, it's the ability to take data from one EarthRanger and send it to another EarthRanger with an organization that you're working with. So the way ER to ER sharing works, it creates a user that is pulling data out of the source system, if you will. So anything that is whatever rights, whatever permission sets that we talked about earlier are granted to that user is the only data that would be available to that ER to ER session. So nothing else could be transferred. So if you were looking at elephant positions, for example, you couldn't see rhino positions if you didn't configure it that way. So you can set up those permissions, again, very granularly about what's shared with other sites. So.
Can I ask how low does that go on the levels? Like, is it per category, per event, or how specific does the sharing go?
The sharing is whatever we can set up the security for. So at this point, and there's work in the backlog to enhance this yet, but we can set it up by event category. So a number of events that are under security. Security, you either have access or don't have access to security, and under devices or subjects, you can set up security on the subject group level. Okay, so
Can you go lower than that?
not yet. That's one thing that we want to do. The way we work around it in support is we do create multiple event categories, for example. So I admit that can be a little cumbersome on the UI when you now have kind of multiple groups, but from a security perspective and security strategy, yeah, it's definitely a better approach. EarthRanger data security, what do we do on the back end? Right now, as you've probably heard before, maybe not, everybody's EarthRanger system is independent. So we have an independent database, we have independent servers, so your servers or your database is different from yours, right? That's not the way that happens in most of the world. That's not what happens at a credit card company, for example. They're not going to have a different server for every site. This is definitely an approach we've taken to try to minimize that. So that means, being able to cross data by any means is not possible. We do have some work coming up, which you may see on the roadmap about multi-tenancy, which is being able to share some of those resources. But believe me, that one of the biggest conversation around that effort is about the security of data that happens, when you add multiple people coming out of a single server. So as you hear more about that, you'll see the reasons why we do that program reasons, for cost reasons, for some feature reasons, but know that that is the way that most of the world works, and that's definitely the number one priority on our part is the security of that system. And then finally, we do have external audits every year. So this is companies not associated with EarthRanger, not associated with AI2. We contract out for them to go through our system and look for vulnerabilities. So oftentimes you'll hear of penetration testing. They're basically looking for ports that are open and looking for any way that they can kind of get in. This goes significantly deeper than that. They're actually doing code reviews, looking at the code that we've got on the back end, experts in the field, looking at where there might be potential problems. So we get a list, there's things on it occasionally, and that's literally our number one priority to get those fixed. So another thing that you will hear about sometimes is third-party products that have a vulnerability exposed in them. Log4net, I mean, there was a recent one. But those kind of sometimes blow up into big news items. We monitor that. We have a service that watches for us anytime that we see any type of vulnerability out in the field, and we know what's on a piece of software that we're using. We upgrade as quickly as we can to the fixes for those vulnerabilities. So again, there's a lot going on the backside as well that we're doing, but we kind of working on this together. So there's a picture you may have seen floating around the internet, kind of what Sean was talking about. Very proud moment for him to get his picture taken and on the internet. And if you can see that, yeah, that's his Post-it note with his password on it. So clearly not a very good practice there. So, questions? Yeah.
Just reference the previous talk. What's the value of a password manager if you have a lot of passwords? Is that something worth looking into?
You want to do that one, or I can take it?
Sorry, what do you mean by that? Sorry.
So, like you have a lot of platforms with different passwords.
Okay.
You manage all those passwords with the password manager. Is that the safe?
Yeah. There's different systems. Some people use, they're good, but again, they still need a master password, but also need password generators. So yeah, very, very good. Very good and very useful. But again, someone else to manage it. So you still need a master password for that password system that has multiple passwords.
Yeah, the password on that password manager is the most insane thing you could ever think of, right? But the advantage, in my opinion, of password managers is that it can give you a random list of characters to use for a password, and you don't have to remember that. So every site is different. Every site is a random group of characters. So yeah, I definitely believe there's benefit there. But like Sean says, you definitely have to make sure that the kind of the keys to that kingdom are as secure as you can possibly get.
It's annoying, but we as humans get lazy. I mean, we use the same passwords across all our social stuff. So you've got to do it. You're holding so much important data that if you can't manage a single password or multiple passwords, then you really do need to give someone else that task. If you're not, that's why we use passphrases, because you can't forget Jack and Jill went up the hill, or I love Man United, they beat Chelsea yesterday, and they use it as a password, and then just ones and zeros. It's really easy to never forget a password like that. So password generator is brilliant, or passphrases that aren't related to you or conservation.
I might have come in a bit late, but what about, for people in Google or Safari, whoever says, let me help you with this password or let me remember this for you, and you most click no, but those who click yes, is that easy to hack that way?
Oh, when you're saving your password locally on your computer, yeah. I don't want to be negative towards I mean, Google are a multi-zillion pound company, right? But I always say I never save cookies and I never save passwords on my local PC. That's my personal preferences. But I'm not. I know I've seen someone here from Google. There's no way I'm going to set up for the Google, right? Because Google. I'm like a penny company, a zillion pounds. But I personally don't, because I'm quite paranoid, because that's what I do for a living. But it's not. But they are excellent systems, and but I personally don't save cookies or do that. Personally.
Just want to comment on what she has asked. It's an interesting one because I have been a victim in exactly the way you say. All it needs is for Google password to be hacked itself.
Yeah.
It's only as long as your Google password.
So I get hacked about 5-6 times a day because of my other job, as in government stuff. And I'm actually teaching this at a university, believe it or not. And anyone that knows me will find that really funny that I'm actually teaching at a university. But it's the same point. If you are aware of it, I'm not trying to scare you. If you're aware of it, then it isn't a hassle. So I get hacked. I get about 4 or 5 text messages a day. I get people phoning me up, and I get about 5-6 emails a day saying you need to click on this, you need to do that. The first thing you do when you see that, you look at the URL, right? And if this comes from Google or Microsoft, the URL doesn't even match the company. That's how sloppy they are, right? So all you do is you look at it, you laugh and delete it. Don't open it. So it isn't a big thing. I don't get stressed over it. If you don't know it and understand it, every time you see something you click, you have a meltdown, don't you, right? Like, oh no. Tell your IT team, they'll fix it pretty quickly, right? But it's not a hassle. If you see someone dropping you some emails or text messages you don't like, just show your IT team and say, what do you do with that? And then just delete it. So even though the criminals are out there doing cyber hacking, it's not an issue if you know what you're looking for, or even aware of it, and then just delete it. Don't worry about it. Because you can't do anything about people emailing you if they've got your email, right? You just have to delete it.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, fantastic session. Really enjoyed it. What if somebody else logs in with my name and my password, and I'm not aware of it? Would EarthRanger be able to pick that up if it's in a different location, different country, or is there something?
Is that enough? That's a strange question. Or
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it would have no way to identify you at that point, right? It would only know you as your username and password. It can't tell that you're the one sitting behind the keyboard or somebody else is sitting behind the keyboard. So clearly the best mechanism there is just making sure that nobody has access to that password.
then I got.
Because I mean, there are some, say Instagram or something like that. You log in a different country, and then they would ask you, is that you that just logged in through email or whatever? Is there, with the scope to do something like that?
Yeah, I think you bring up a great question, right? So we always have conversations around what can we do better, right? Everybody does, and things keep moving, things keep changing. What can we do? One of the requests that's on our backlog is to be able to IP block. You know, if you're only coming from a certain IP range to allow access, if you're coming from outside of that, not. So if you have your network in the control room, you know, on your campus, you know, you can get in, but if you go home even, sometimes you can't get in. There's more advanced ways you can actually whitelist IP address or whitelist MAC addresses. So you actually have to go in and identify your machine specifically. We don't have this feature yet, but these are definitely things that are, you know, on our roadmap that we continue to evaluate on a regular basis. You know, if these things continue to, you know, if they resonate with you as critical, yeah, definitely, you know, let us know that.
There is, I mean, Brian Smith from Connected Conservation Foundation, and I know this is an EarthRanger conversation, but I play in the commercial space as well as Sean. EarthRanger is but one door with data, right? You have to look at your whole infrastructure. If you have a look at how do you share strategic information, chances are it's sitting on OneDrive, it's sitting on Google Drive. That is yet another source. You lose a mobile phone, it's got that application installed, it's not well protected, they've got access to it. So you really have to have a look at your whole security structure. EarthRanger is one of them. Come back to your question, multi-factor authentication is what you need. You need to make sure that if you lose one device, they can't get access to your information except if you okay it on another device. You know, so those are the kind of things that's not EarthRanger specific. Exactly. It is just common good security practice to look after looking.
I'll second that, and actually to stick up for EarthRanger. we've monitored multiple times and they've never been data breached on the dark web. And secondly, bang on, this isn't all about EarthRanger, this is about you in your ops room, looking after everything else. So don't finger poke.
Sorry, if, so related to that, is there a way that you can build in something to say, you know, as soon as you leave your site or your reserve, whatever the case may be, that your EarthRanger just automatically logs out, you know, out of that 48-hour window?
Automatically logs out outside of the 40.
Yeah, so like
The session will automatically expire after that long, but within that window, that would mostly the IP, kind of the IP blocking would give you kind of that type of feature.
And then just the second question, if we wanted to check if our reserve has been, you know, exposed to dark web, can we
I'll do it for
find
you
that?
every weekend. I'll speak to them and just put it in.
Okay.
Don't everyone else speak. But no, that's the, I'm aware of the organisation, so I'll just put it in the system and have a look.
Hi, just building on that, if you manage to develop something like a blocked IP, make sure that you also make that a choice, because some of us are not always underground, you know, with the monitoring system. Some of us are traveling and have to, in different places, logging into our systems.
Like always, right? When the more restrictions you put, the more restrictions you'll have, right? So it definitely addresses, you know, it affects your operations at times as well. I mean, but then that's the balance that everybody has to decide for themselves. So. But yeah,
related to that though, I mean, if you leave the country, just have, like what Rian suggested, like kind of a two-way authentication, so that if you are off-site or you leave the country, like now, I mean, we've all got our laptops with us probably. So just a second way of confirming that it is you. That's just something that would be useful if there's something
it's a good
that
idea.
creates it.
Definitely talk to the team about all of these ideas. Yes, Roger?
So there's one review. Mainly at Sean. So can you just give us a quick 1 minute on the importance of encrypting your data before it actually reaches the operations center or even such as your radio system?
We serve together. Ask me again, simplify that question, what do you mean?
Encryption of data before it reaches the operations center. So before it becomes a problem of people accessing.
You mean what, radios or oh, okay. Well, again, me and Swabi actually served together in the communications world back in the day, and ultimately everything we've done, everything we do is encrypted, right? So unfortunately, and I listened to the sales pitch by the way, I promised I wouldn't, but there's a lot of people out there still using analog, and there's still people out there using digital radios that haven't got encryption on them, right? Because ultimately you've gone to a trusted supplier of both radios, whatever data systems that you're using, and ultimately you build it, and you have to trust those people. Lucky for you, EarthRanger and the background of the organisation is, you know, one of the best on the planet. But there's other systems that you're using, you're buying, and you're probably aware or you think they're encrypted. But ultimately, a poacher could get, you know, $20 radio scanner and probably scan and listen to every single conversation you're having, which then basically ultimately again talking about, you know, social profiling on the World Wide Web. Then they're social profiling you, listening to your radio transmissions, where you are, where you're pushing people, and then ultimately they'll be listening to the different voices on the radio, knowing who's a commander and who's not. You can tell who's in charge on the radio and who's not, just by the language and what they've been saying. So you can do all this amazing stuff at the back, and some amazing questions actually that you've just mentioned on some of the stuff that I would like to talk to you about as well, because actually I wasn't aware of those. But ultimately you can do all that, and then you're running around with unencrypted radios, or unencrypted SOPs, so your tactics, your techniques and procedures a week, your SOPs a week, and all the systems you're using, bringing all that data in and not even encrypted, which basically means by the time it gets to the ops room, pointless how encrypted your EarthRanger is, because everyone knows what you're doing. So, yeah, so I'll make that your question?
Yes.
Oh, phew. I think I'll try. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, obviously it's a 45-minute session, and it's a very, very complex topic, right? So there's a lot of pieces and parts to it.
The point is, you shouldn't be freaked out by it. We're just trying to tell you that A, conservation is a threat on the World Wide Web. Make sure all your data is encrypted and all your radios are encrypted. And if you don't know they're encrypted, go to a third-party organisation and say, hey, look, you know, we bought this 2 years ago, we bought this garment, we bought this radio, we bought this computer, can you have a look and just do an assessment? And then they'll come back and say you're good or bad. Nothing wrong with doing that, right? You're not tied to one person to do everything.
So, we are supporting new countries to set up new ArcRanger sites. So is this data security session an automated training that ArcRanger offers? And then secondly, at the site level, I'm really seeing there's different access rights depending on how they plan themselves. So what are the different access rights for the ArcRanger team? Like what is the highest, which is the lowest, how is that organized, or is everyone within the team able to manage for that side?
Yeah, good questions. I think when you have multiple organizations or multiple sites, definitely contact us, on the support team, and we can definitely walk you through, kind of the best way to approach that. I think everyone's a little bit unique in that situation. You made a comment about training materials. Absolutely right. I don't have that right now. Part of the team that I work with is responsible for training. I will definitely make sure that we get some sort of a security brief, security best practices put together, and we can make that available.
Training is the most powerful thing. If you've got all your policies trained and everyone knows what they're doing in that ops room, on EarthRanger, and everything you got, that's worth something.
We're good. Okay, we're about out of time. One more question?
I just have one question regarding the radios. What is the best way to protect your radios if they get stolen or something like that?
Depends on what system you use. If you're using, say, Motorola Turbonet, there is a way of killing these radios when they're taken. And you also have. Yeah, you basically go in, right click on that particular radio, third line down, kill radio. You can also use very powerful, you can also listen into the radio as well. So if it's stolen, you can use it against the person who stole it as well.
Every conference you go to, you hear so much stuff and you have all these great ideas. If you put one thing into action when you get back, it's a successful conference. The one thing I challenge you to do is review your security plan, your data security plan. If you don't have one, develop one. Okay? Start simple. Just the 5 bullet points that you can tape on the wall in the ops room and go over that monthly with the staff. Right? So it's all about training, all about reinforcing. So, and thank you for coming.